As technology changed, CDs were gone. Nobody buys CDs anymore, especially from, a peddler on the street. No longer was it that you could just be on the corner and hustle CDs. You had to find a new corner, and the new corner became the internet. What's up? Welcome to The Perspective. My name's Devin, and this is my co-host, Mitch. And today we're going to be talking about the evolution of business and how we got where we are right now with what we would define as the modern business.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic because, I'm not that old. It's not like I've been around for 100 years, but it doesn't matter because you can still see where business has come. But you look at where business has changed and the models have changed in the past 10, 15 years. It is at such a rapid progression compared to previous. And it's kind of blown up where people, especially people starting businesses or entrepreneurs, they're almost lost. And they pick a path and they go down it and it doesn't work for them. And
it feels like the wild, wild west, right?
It really is. And I think that there's a lot of people that could do better or could improve their quality of business and life if they had just seen the options and been presented with them.
Right. So how would you define a business? If somebody was to start a business today, right now, what would that look like? How would you define that?
As far as if someone was to start their own business, I define it personally as anyone that finds something that can create a sustainable income, whether it be for themselves or for anyone part of that company. That's how I view a business. And that really, I know it leaves it wide open, but for me, anyone who has an income based off something that they've started and they're not relying on somebody else for that income other than consumers is a business as far as I'm concerned.
As I would take it even one step further, and because I think it's really important to include the idea that you have to be serving somebody with something. So whether that's being inside of a retail space, where you're selling clothes or accessories or, household items, whatever it is, or if you're providing a service for somebody, plumbing, electrician, that kind of stuff, whatever it is, as long as there's a problem that exists and you have a solution for it, and then you can trade your solution for an exchange of some kind of compensation. I would say in form of money, but there's a lot of options that people forget about, like trading and bartering and all that kind of stuff. I know when I first started, I heard a story about Russell Brunson's first funnel that he ever sold, and he actually didn't get any money for it. He sold it to a dentist and actually got dental services in exchange for him providing this service, because that was something that he needed at the time. So we oftentimes forget about that. And that's where I think where business originated, was from the idea that, oh, well, that person has something that I need, and I have something that person needs, so we can exchange those items. Like if I'm a farmer and my main thing is dairy, and somebody else is a farmer and their main thing is potatoes, well, I got some milk, they got some potatoes, we can make an exchange, everybody's happy now. And then came along the introduction of currency and money, and using money as a representation of value.
Do you know where they've actually identified where, I guess, commercialism or the Industrial Revolution actually started? Was the invention of the yoke on oxes, because it allowed a farmer to cultivate more than his family needed. So as soon as you have excess, then all of a sudden you can take that excess, you're still provided for, and you can trade it or sell it. And all of a sudden, then it was like, okay, well, now you have people that have a dentist office or an eye doctor, and they don't grow their own food because they're relying on a farmer to produce more food than he needs for his family. And that was kind of identified as that pivotal moment in history where we began to move away from just being self-sufficient and, trading that apple pie for some water kind of thing, right? But that was that pivotal moment of business.
Well, and it used to be too that, all you really needed was a good spot to sell stuff and you're good. For example, way, way, way back, they kind of had that, town center where people would bring their goods and barter and trade things in that sort of setting. And then as that evolved into something else, it was like, well, if you have this business and it's on Main Street in town and it's always there, there's a reliability and a predictability, like a bakery or a barber shop, where you can always go to that place and get the thing that you need. And so real estate became like really super desirable, because if you had a good spot, you had lots of customers. Whereas if you run, or outside of town or at the edge of town or something like that, or otherwise inaccessible, that limited your ability to serve people with whatever solution it is you had.
Well, then became New York, right?
Yeah.
Why did New York become such a hub? Because it was the landing spot for ports from Europe. And look at that real estate now. What people were buying for, $100 before, now all of a sudden it was worth hundreds of millions, because it was such a staple real estate spot for that commercialism and growth. So it's almost like we've gone from that ox and creating more food than you need to provide for your family, bring it to New York, bringing it to the growth of that, because that was kind of the import hub for, the turn of the century, and as far as the late 1800s and a little bit before that. Now we fast forward through, the World War, which increased technology and the ability to make things at fast productions. And then that technology, when it wasn't used for war anymore, was put into place after that. So you saw a large development in technology through the 60s and 70s. And then the 80s, I don't know, it's kind of a wash, because not a lot of good things happened.
I heard they didn't do so good back in those days.
Yeah, the cards show that. But, you bring it to our age now and you see the evolution since that. Even, late 90s to 2000s was a big change. And you see how rapid. Even look at the cell phone, right? And I think the cell phone and that technology through the mid 90s into the 2000s, that affected business huge. Salespeople that didn't have cell phones, how did they function?
Right.
Their customers waited for the next day, because they would look at their messages, they would go through them, and they would help their customers the next day when they got the message. Cell phones introduced, all of a sudden your salesmen are accessible, your bosses are accessible. Well, then there was no waiting period, and things had to just happen rapidly. And then you had the cell phones change into smartphones where you could text. Well, now all of a sudden beepers were outdated. You got a text, and now you had no excuse not to answer. And so that sense of urgency in business, it escalated to the point now where people are burning out because they can't turn their phone off without losing business.
We're far too accessible, right? It's like you're a text message away, and if I don't get an answer in like 8 seconds, I'm like, why is he ignoring me or whatever, right? And I would liken it to like the parabolic growth rate that we've had as far as technology goes and all this other things. When I first kind of got my feet wet in the whole world of like running my business, I started a record label in my early 20s. And back then it was really easy to create products. So we could screen print tees for our shows and stuff. Like we could burn our own CDs, and you just have to find like the right location. And this is kind of like mirroring historically. You just find the right location and you tell people how good you are, or show people how good you are, and you can sell things to people. And so this is where we kind of got our humble beginnings. Was there's a street in Calgary where I live, or I guess we live, called 17th Ave. It was also known as the Red Mile. And there was a club on there that was frequented a lot. It was a super huge, super popular club. Right across the road was a funeral home. And I remember this was the place to be, because they were the only place on that whole entire road that had an external power outlet. So we would bring a boombox down there, plug it in, and then play our music on the CD to the people that were like coming out of the club for like smoke breaks, or they're like, bar hopping, all that kind of stuff. So it'd be me, my brother, and a couple of our buddies, and we were just like out there performing. our music, and it was terrible, terrible music, but people were drunk and they didn't care. It was a good time. So we would be performing and we had like duffel bags of CDs that we printed our own, and we were hustling these CDs and selling them for $10 a pop to the people that were there. So it was really easy to, sell 100 CDs in a night and make a cool chunk of change. But what I realized in those moments, and this is where, keeping up with the Joneses or whatever, as technology changed, CDs were gone. Nobody buys CDs anymore, especially from, a peddler on the street. We had to figure out a way to continue to grow fans, build a brand. Now all your music is streamed on, different platforms like Apple Music and Spotify, that kind of thing. And that's where a small portion of your revenue comes from. And then you got to figure out touring because it's a lot different. And so no longer was it that you could just be on the corner and hustle CDs. You had to find a new corner, and the new corner became the internet. And I grew up on the internet. I've been on the internet since before the internet was even an internet. That on dial-up AOL, when you got those CDs and cereal boxes telling you like, you can sign up for AOL. Like I remember those days vividly. And so the corner store online now becomes your website, and you performing to a bunch of people coming out of a bar is like you on a social media platform. And these are different ways to bring people to your business. But like, if you're not executing on them, or you don't get part of that formula right, just like if you're on the outskirts or outside of town, you're not going to get a lot of business. So if you're not performing those little pieces right, you're missing out on the opportunity to actually build a business or grow a business. And this is where a lot of skeptics come into play. Like, oh, there's too many people out there doing that, or online business doesn't work. I've tried it. And it's just that there's small pieces of the things that you tried that you were missing. And if you had those things, you would be more successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to success. Like the reason lots of people, I look at CDs that I've bought from guys on the street, Vancouver. I bought a CD from a guy that was performing. I loved his music. Anyway, and then I heard him on CBC radio, like, a little while later, and I reached out to him. We talked. I remember being in front of Much Music. Man, I can't even remember how long ago, back when Much Music existed.
Back when it was a real thing.
When it was a thing, yeah. And they actually had people performing. And I remember being there because Sum 41 was there. And so they came out and they were, talking to the crowd. And this guy comes up behind me and he throws a CD in my pocket and runs away. Because you couldn't do that. Like, you get in huge trouble in front of Much Music. And yeah. I looked at the CD and I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I plugged it in. I'm like, this is some of the coolest music I've ever heard. Like, it was very cool. And they ended up, I found them on iTunes, like, years later. And just, I was like, it was very ahead of its time in a sense. But what I loved about it was that's a story that I will never forget with that CD. Mm-hmm. But now that element of connecting or having that story, a lot of that's gone, or it's a lot harder to achieve. It's not that it's impossible, but with social media, it's that connection to a sense is gone, or not as valued anymore. Maybe your music was terrible, but people probably have that CD somewhere and they're like, oh, I remember that time at that club and we came out and those guys were at the funeral home. We bought that CD from them. That story that carries with people, right? And so I find with social media, especially with online companies, when people are like, oh, that doesn't work. I think any business can work if it's done properly. So I think whether it's a multi-level marketing company, whether it's an online platform, retail, whether it's a brick and mortar, there's a level of success that can be had regardless. But because you're in a vast array of now people starting their own businesses or, being online with a big presence, you have got to change your tactics. That's where this evolution comes in.
You remember when you were younger and the idea of being a businessman was like, ugh, nobody wants to be a businessman. Like, that's ridiculous. I'd never want to do that. And there was always like this like negative connotation attached to it.
I don't want to.
And I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't know when that happened, but there was like a period in time where entrepreneurs and businessmen became the rock stars of our culture. Guys like Gary Vee or Grant Cardone or Tim Ferriss, like these guys are celebrities on the back of building a business, and the opportunity for them to, build an audience and connect with them in a meaningful way and deliver value at the same time, and then grow their enterprise. they really attached to those principles and took them to the moon. And I think that that's a huge part of what most people are getting wrong in their understanding of how a business works. Let's go back to, like, if you have something that serves people, it solves a problem or is a solution to something, and you're not getting that in front of the right people. Like, imagine if you sold a defibrillator, but you didn't get it in front of the hospitals and millions of people. Like, that's an emergency. What if, that same principle now exists? And I can liken this on so many different levels. I have a friend who, she does string art. And I was like, okay, listen, let's say you create a string art piece on commission for somebody, and they, their grandpa really liked the Blue Jays, and you make a Blue Jays string art thing and it's hanging up on their wall, but that person's going through, a really hard time in their life. And they're walking through their hallway, just like contemplating, inevitable doom here. And they see that picture, and that picture reminds them of the conversation they had with their grandfather about being strong and persevering through adversity and all this other stuff. And they go, you know what, I'm going to change my mind, and maybe I'm going to I'll try again tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll live again for another day. Like, you saved somebody's life with that. And if you're not actually out there doing that, like, what a huge disservice to the world. And I think it might be an oversimplification to somebody, but I think people are overcomplicating something, maybe because they've been told not to believe in themselves, or maybe they don't think that they're capable of these things. And there's so much of that too out there in the world that's stopping people from actually serving people. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because, especially now with so much, I think that people are focusing, you're right, people are focusing on the wrong things. For example, on a social media aspect, people are focusing on followers and the amount of followers. I want to be an influencer. What? Okay. How do you make an income? How do you make a business of being an influencer? Sponsorships? Maybe. But let's be real. Not all of us can have sponsorships in that sense. So what are you trying to achieve with your business? And is it sustainable? Or are you going to have another business as well? But how many posts out there be like, build a business around your passion and the money will come. It's true to an extent, but you have to find what that principle is and who you're trying to go after. Because going after the masses, you're setting yourself up for failure, because there's a lot of people that are going to be hard on you.
Yeah. And it requires a thick skin to be able to go out into the world and put yourself out there in some sort of meaningful way. And I find oftentimes people get really defensive against the people who don't believe in themselves and who project that onto them. So we call these the haters, right? There's this, ominous group of people that just want to see the world burn. And yeah, sure, those people exist, but having deploying a level of empathy and understanding, like, where that person's coming from, like, why are they shitting on your idea? And if that's what's happening, maybe they don't believe in it, and that's fine for them not to believe in it. And where did that come from? Well, probably because they were told their whole lives that they're incapable. And so they take that same belief and then they project it upon you because they don't believe in you and whatever it is that you're up to. But let's be blunt and real about this. And if you really want to start a business, here's what you need to do. Figure out that thing that you enjoy doing and that serves people, whether that's being art and creative, or if there's actually a retail thing. Like, what if you just like putting stickers on bottles and selling water bottles to people who do sports? Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but find a thing that that you can provide a solution to. Create a website and then build an audience of people around a specific subject that you really, really enjoy. And I'm going to use this as an example. There was a guy who started a YouTube channel dedicated to his journey learning how to jump good, because he couldn't jump good. I know that sounds really silly at first, but watch how far this goes. So he just started filming himself jumping, and he figured something out in one or two of the videos early on. And he was like, "Ooh, that's the thing. I'm doing this exercise and it's helping me get this result. And that's really awesome." And he continued to share videos of him jumping, his different exercise and all this kind of stuff. Well, check it out. There's a niche group of people in the world that actually need to know how to jump really high. They play sports. And these sports people now are following him. And now, after a certain period of time, he amassed millions of followers from making videos of jumping. millions of followers. And then he created a training course, and that training course was dedicated to helping people who were in the world of sports be better at their sport by increasing their jump. And so over time, that person built a business off of him just learning how to do something. And sure, there may have been some people, and I probably could go find the video and share like screenshots of it, of, you know, what kind of an idiot is sharing dumb videos jumping on YouTube? Like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever watched. And yeah, that happens. But he's also a multimillionaire now on the back of teaching high-level elite sports players really good exercises. So that's as simple as it is, finding something that serves people in a meaningful way, and then, you know, leveraging what you know on that. And it doesn't matter how far you are along the journey. Like, compare me and you to somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk. The dude runs a $400 million media company. I'm nowhere near there. Although I might have a vast expertise in the world of marketing and human psychology and sociology, that kind of stuff. That's not it's not all that I'm where I am, and I'm ahead of somebody else in this world. So somebody who just started a business but knows nothing about marketing and wants to know something about marketing, well, Gary Vaynerchuk is unreachable. It's $10,000 a minute to spend time with him. But for me, we can sit down and I can show you some of the basics that are going to help you get started. You're going to understand some core principles like the 3 pillars of marketing and how that's important and why you should be deploying that on social media channels to get attention around your business. That will help you. And as I learn more, I can continue to pass down and serve those things to other people. And eventually I'll be at that Gary Vaynerchuk level where I have a $400 million media company. But right now, I serve the people that are just a little bit behind me, and I look ahead to learn from people who are a little bit ahead of me. And that exists everywhere. If you're good at, knitting, if you're good at making pots, if you're good at painting, whatever the thing is that you're good at, as long as you're sharing that with the world and building a community around that, eventually that's going to turn into a business. And that's as simple as it is. That's the modern business, right?
Yeah. And as much as I see some downfalls to social media, we got to be realistic. There's some dark pits with social media, but you look at the change in generations, the attitude, everyone complains about millennials and they're complaining even more about Generation Z and that, but you look at where they came from and who's before them. That concept that I could be my own boss, that I could start my own company, that really wasn't the mainstream thought. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was, you go to find someone, you go to a stable job, you work 9 to 5, you come home. And that changed. And there was a point where, and a lot of it was with the millennials when the internet became, where they could say, hey, I can reach more people. People will pay me for this. You know what? I'm just going to start doing this. And that comprehension that pretty much every household could be independent if they wanted to be started. Whereas because that network wasn't as vast, you had to be a Rockefeller or something like that to have that vast network. Whereas now that's gone. You don't need to come from money in order to be self-sufficient and to have your own business. And I think that social media did well for that aspect of it. And now the conversation starts, and it ain't going to be on this podcast, but how do you utilize social media? Because you can do it terribly wrong, as I have learned, or you can be very successful on it. And how to utilize the internet, because if you don't use the internet, it's a sad fact, you're not going to reach your full potential. It's not that it's impossible, but the generation now of consumers are very online based, whether that's by reviews or whether that's actually by purchasing, like from Amazon. But you go to a mall, like, we've got in Calgary, we've got the Cross Iron Mall. In Edmonton, they got West Edmonton Mall, some of the biggest malls, in North America. You talk to most people there, you know what they're going to say? Yeah, I checked out online and this store has this, or I like this product and I know I can get it here because I've seen it online. They're not going to the mall just to window shop. They're going there to actually touch the product that they've already done the research on. So you want to talk about modern business and how it's evolving. Even your brick and mortar stores are being affected by the online presence.
Look at what Amazon did. They started selling books and buying Google AdWords at pennies per click and build $1 trillion business on the back of that. Mind you, they've solved one of the world's biggest problems, logistics. How do you get this from here to here right now. They figured it out. And I couldn't even begin to imagine how that works, but it's changed the way we all can do business. The same thing goes with, the way eBay revolutionized the world of auction, right? The same way social media like Facebook changed the way that we connect with each other. Having all of these channels now to interact with each other means we can create so many more opportunities. I remember growing up, my teachers literally told me, listen, you got to figure out the job that you're going to do. Here's a list of jobs you can do. Go do those jobs. They also told me you're never going to make money playing video games. Guess what? Esports is dominating right now. One of the biggest industries in the world and the fastest growing industries in the world. Look at guys like Stone Mountain or Picnic or Aculite or Tomographic. These guys literally make money playing video games for a few hours in the day, and they don't even have to put in an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
That drives me insane. You can just go online and do the thing that you enjoy doing and share it with a community of people. And this community of people support what you're doing. And it really is. It just kind of boils back down to whether it's historically speaking, the purpose of a business, or in the modern day definition of what business is, as long as you're serving people with something and you can gather them around you and show them why it's important to them and then provide that to them for an exchange of money, you're in business. And I'm sure there's some laws and things like licenses you need for certain industries and all that, which is whatever. If you're into that, then go down those roads, but it's as easy as a Google search.
And I think for you, it fits well because with your marketing expertise and that business model behind you, I mean, everyone wants to know how to market on social media. Maybe they don't want to pay for it. Maybe they don't want to buy your services, but they want to learn.
Yeah.
And they know that there's a bit of a trick to it. With the sales perspective with our company, it's like sales is almost a lost art. There's certain industries that there's some very good salespeople, but it's been so blown up and torn apart because now it's like everyone just goes online. They've lost that human touch in a sense. And so because of that, you've lost customer service. You've lost those relationship building techniques because everything's at an arm's length now. But then when you need to go back and actually interact, you're disappointed in the quality that's out there. And so for us, we're almost meeting a new challenge where, people don't even know what sales is in a sense. They think it's just being there to sell somebody something. And that's not
so much more than that.
Right. But because of that social media aspect, that the sales concept has changed. Well, I can just sell it online. Okay, but that's not sales. That's selling. And that's a consumer buying something or buying a service, but that's not being a salesman. And so for us, it was like, okay, there's a big need in the market for bringing that sales aspect back, because now all of a sudden, because there's so many companies out there and because there's so many entrepreneurs, who's going to succeed in that pool of sharks? Well, somebody that actually has a good sales presence in line with their marketing presence. And so the evolution of business there was now, instead of having one major corporation like General Motors or Ford, now all of a sudden you've got 20. And who do you pick from? And like you alluded to earlier, it's a matter of who you connect with. Do you want to buy from a guy at a car dealership that you don't like? You may want that car, but you'll go buy it from somebody you like. I've been there. Yeah. I've walked out of a dealership passing up a car that I really liked because I know I can get that car somewhere else, but I didn't want to give that guy my money.
Yeah.
Because he was a terrible person.
I would use this analogy. Marketing is really, really simple. It's arbitrage of attention. How much does it cost me to get somebody's attention and then make a purchase? And do I make more than what it costed me to make that happen? So customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value. It's a super, super simple equation. But the fine art to it is the sales aspect of it. It's what you're up to, which is teaching people how to communicate these ideas effectively. You could make a pie in your kitchen and it could be the best pie in the world, literally the best pie in the world. But if it stays in your kitchen and you don't tell anybody about it, they're never going to know and you're never going to sell anything. You could take that pie and you could stand on the street corner and now you got a better location. But if you don't know how to interact with people and you're just yelling at them, buy my pie, they're not going to buy the pie. And keep in mind, it's still the best pie in the world. But if you put a nice box on it and you put it in the right location, that's marketing. Put a nice box on it, put it in location, and then you let people know, hey, by the way, this apple pie is going to be the most delectable pie you're ever going to taste. The crust is so flaky and the insides are so good and blah, blah, blah. That's sales. So we take and we put it in the right place, and then we communicate with people in a meaningful way that's going to help them see why eating this pie is going to be the best experience they've ever had. And now you have a business. Now you have the thing that's going to support you and your family, because you can separate or differentiate yourself from the rest of the other people who make pies out there in the world. Because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's been done before, and there's enough competition that if you don't have your shit together, you could be lost at sea very easily.
You know why Tupperware did so well? And we may never even think Tupperware is just a common name. We think it's this big brand. You go to the dollar store, you buy some Tupperware.
I take it for granted. I don't know what I would do without it.
Right. And we all use it, and they've expanded it, and other companies have taken the plastic industry and made it. But what revolutionized what we know as business as far as diversity was the company Tupperware. So they were one of the first, I guess you call it one of the first multi-level marketing structures to focus on wives, stay-at-home moms. Because back in the 60s, they weren't the breadwinners, right? They would stay at home, they'd cook, paint the fence, husband was off to work. So they came and said, hey, why don't you tell your friends about this product? Tell them about the product, we'll pay you. For every sale you make, we'll pay you. Well, all of a sudden, within a short period of time, you had wives making more money than their husbands, which was culturally unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so you had these home-based businesses starting up all over the place, and take like the Tupperware conventions, like were mind-blowing if you ever see pictures of them. And there were husbands that were quitting their jobs to support their wife because she was doing so well. And they were being made fun of for it.
I remember this with Mary Kay, the makeup.
Very similar,
right?
Similar, but
yeah.
Tupperware was kind of that launch of that comprehension that you can be self-sufficient. You can find a product and sell to your friends, right? And it got blown up and it got corrupted and it got a bad taste over the years because other companies took the model and twisted it. But in and itself, at the beginning, it was a great model. It was successful, and it empowered people. And it empowered people that weren't traditionally allowed to be empowered, right? Those wives were stuck. Nobody was looking at the force of women in their sales. And they exploded. Look at what Tupperware become. No one will ever touch them.
No.
Like, they created that, right? That legacy. And so, bringing it back to our day, how are we changing? And now all of a sudden we've got, whether you're a single mom at home, whether you've got a family, whatever your situation is, you do have an opportunity. But now they did that without the internet.
Right.
They did it just on sales. They did it on personality. Because who doesn't want to, they go into a house and all of a sudden, instead of this Cadillac driving salesman, they had a mom in there. And she was talking to them like a mom. And
like a human being.
Like a human being.
Which is what's missing from social media, right? Taking a flyer and just stuffing it in somebody's face and saying, we're the best. Like, that doesn't work. Maybe when there was only 2 pizza joints in the whole city and I had to choose between Domino's or Pizza Hut, sure. Who's got the best deal? Who can do it the cheapest? What, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a small window of opportunity for that to work. But when you take that same principle now and you go online, like, buyers of things, of products and services, for in a fraction of a second can get as much information as they want. So if I need a plumber and I look around, I can find a million plumbers. If I want that plumber to do their job properly, I can also spend 15 minutes watching a couple of YouTube videos and make sure that what they're doing is what I asked them to do and how much it's worth. So you really got to go above and beyond. It's commoditized the way that we serve each other. So you have to be that plumber that when you're done, you test the sink by washing that person's dishes. That's the plumber that goes above and beyond. That's the plumber that builds that long-term relationship. Because I guarantee you, the next time something goes wrong, you're calling that same person because that person took care of you. And if we can bring that personality back into the business and the way you interact with people online, it'll change the way people receive you. and bringing some level of confidence in the way that you communicate with people is even better. But that also comes with practice. Like I've been on camera for the last decade. So me being in front of a camera and hearing my own voice and, looking at my funny lopsided ear, I'm comfortable with that now. I'm totally good.
I didn't even notice that till now. Now I'm always.
Yeah. And these are things. So you as a person, if you can put your thing down and instead care more about the people you're serving, you're going to go a lot further. You're going to do a lot more in the world than you're ever going to do if you just sit there and worry about yourself. And newsflash, nobody's worried about you. They're all worried about themselves.
Yeah. No, it's a conversation that can go on forever, and it probably will. Like we will probably always bounce back to this at some point because it is changing that fast. Every week, every month, there's different styles of businesses. Dragon's Den and Shark Tank changed how people thought about working for themselves or their own business. And that's another discussion because I have very strong opinions on that. But
I've watched every single episode of both everything. I studied this. I am a student of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den.
It's valuable in a sense because you really see a distinction between people that are entrepreneur minded and people that came up with an idea and people that just should go work for somebody else. And you see that distinction, but everyone has that equal opportunity. And right now I find in the marketplace, because of whether it be diversification, whether it be equal rights, whatever the movement, it's created a platform where everyone has the opportunity to build something. What they do with it is up to them. And whatever market they go in, whatever industry, whatever size of company they actually want, whether they want to stay small or go big, it's there. And there's an opportunity for it. But I find the successful businesses, they team up with the right people. They don't think they know it all. And they love what they do, right? Because if you come home stressed, you're not going to put your best into it. There's an acceptable level of stress there, but they'll burn out and the company will fail. I've seen companies do really well for a period of time. Something happens and you don't necessarily know what it is. And it just falls apart. The employees leave. Nobody's happy. The company crumbles. So my sense of modern business is there isn't one structure. Modern business is whatever you want to turn it into. Your definition was spot on, but you look at where businesses come from. I think every person in the everyday world has an opportunity to have a modern business.
Yep.
But they need the tools and they need the support from the right people. And I know that your company is going to do great. Maybe it's a slow start, but I really think you have something with what you do. So I think I
think that's actually a really great place to kind of put a cap on things. Is as far as this podcast goes, the perspective is going to be all about sharing those tools and the knowledge that we've acquired over the years of us doing what you and me have been doing, and then how that can help somebody else. So for anybody that's listening and or watching, make sure you subscribe so that you guys can actually keep up with all of those things, because on each episode, we're going to be talking about different tools that you can access, where you can get them from, how that's going to impact your business. And our only aim really is just to bring as much value to you as possible and really build a community around supporting each other in growing and building businesses. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, whatever it is.